The leadership experience you create will influence people. Hey listeners, great to have you with me on the Leadership is Changing podcast. And I wanted to share with you something that I got to experience and witness the other day. It actually made me disturbed about what happened. I saw in front of my eyes a situation that blew me away and demonstrated the opposite to leadership in the way that it should be. In fact, I saw it was management. In fact, it could have been poor management, if I want to put it that way. And I wondered how often this type of thing happens in organizations, no matter the size of the organization. So I'm going to share with you a scenario and also share with you how much the leadership experience you create influences others. Let's discuss.
Welcome to Leadership is Changing. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change. This is taking your leadership to another level by finding the balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing with your host, Denis Giannoutsas.
Welcome to the Ask Denis episode number 397. Wow, we're getting close to episode 400, and I'm really excited about doing that. Look, this is a freestyle episode where I'm asked a question by our listeners or share my thoughts, experiences, and insights from working with many leaders around the globe. I wanted to share with you something that I got to experience and witness the other day. As I do, I'm also going to share with you about different areas that I think that leaders should be thinking about or should do in these different scenarios or situations. I'm a great believer that you and I, in fact all of us, are shaped based on the leadership experiences that we have. The whole scenario played out in front of me, and I sat back and I watched the actions, the language, the tone used, and the body language and reactions of those in the location that I'm about to talk about. It was at a cafe, and I was there having something to eat and drink while I was doing some planning for the year. I've always found this cafe with lots of energy and has a modern look and feel. Some of you may know that I grew up in the coffee industry. My parents have been in the industry on and off for the past 63 years. Now, when I walked into the cafe, I locked eyes with the owner and I said hi, but there was no response or acknowledgement when normally there is. So as leaders, we should always acknowledge others around you, no matter what's going on for you. Because you see, what's going on for you is happening for you. Just remember that there's others around you as well, and we may need to, or we should acknowledge them as well. So I thought to myself, something's not right here. The staff and owner were getting on with things, and the coffee and tea and food orders were being taken. The food was coming out of the kitchen. The coffee machine and coffee grinder noise was happening in the background. And it was a great atmosphere in the cafe. In fact, the cafe was packed full of people. Then something happened. Something clicked. And I was like, what the heck just happened here? What I'm about to share with you, I know is frustrating and hard when you're running a cafe and you have customers waiting. Something's happened. I also want to take into account that many hospitality businesses and places have suffered a lot over the past 3 years due to lockdowns and so forth. But in this scenario, what actually happened is that the coffee grinder stopped working. To me, it sounded like there was a $15,000 coffee grinder from what I could hear was being said by the owner, and it was fairly new. The owner, in other words, the leader of the organization, changed dramatically in front of my eyes. They started swearing out loud, and the customers could hear this. In fact, it was making them stop their conversations and make them turn around to see what was actually going on. The language was getting louder and stronger over a period of time, especially when the owner started to smack the coffee grinder and take his anger out on the machine. Look, leaders, no matter the situation, remember to step back and breathe. The person who is the calmest is the person who's in control. Now, for me, it's easy to say this stuff, right? But it's not always easy when you are in a situation in the midst of things happening, and I get that. But in this scenario, it started to escalate, and now both the staff and customers were feeling really uncomfortable. You see, our actions as leaders, In other words, our language, the tone, how we say things or how we do things has impact on others and the environment that we're in. Customers started to walk away. New customers were coming in and didn't like what they were hearing, seeing, or feeling. You see, one thing for us as leaders that we need to understand here is that we set the tone of the environment and what's actually happening. We can give off a vibe, some energy that others will pick up on. The thing here is, what kind of energy, what kind of vibe are we giving? Now, the owner tried to keep fixing the machine and it wasn't working and he was getting more and more frustrated. So as leaders, sometimes we need to step back so we can see what is happening. But what do we tend to do? We tend to go into solution mode and try to do it all ourselves. Yes, sometimes these coffee machines or grinders may have a stone in it, or it needs to be reset. There are times when we need to get the professionals in to help us, get the right people around us to help us in certain situations. Now, talking about help, the owner asked one of the staff, in fact, they were the only staff on the front area of the cafe, to call the supplier of the coffee grinder and get them to come in and fix it. But there was no answer to the phone call. The owner then got the staff member to tell people there is no more coffee. We can't make coffee. In fact, we are shutting the shop. Sometimes leaders can jump to conclusions and make decisions and do things without taking time to think about things and do some critical thinking. Then something happened and I thought, what the heck? The owner wanted to know who was on making coffee's duty the day before. They wanted to know whether they had changed the settings on the grinder. A leader always takes responsibility and doesn't blame their team. I don't care who you are. The buck stops with you as the leader, period. That's what happens. By now, the staff member was feeling anxious and they looked at me and gave a big sigh. I said, keep smiling. You're doing well. The owner called the coffee grinder supplier and left a voicemail. Within 5 minutes, the coffee grinder supplier called. In my opinion, the owner was very strong, abusive, and threatened the supplier. If I was the supplier, I would be getting in there to that cafe to get things fixed so the owner was not losing any more business and that they could operate. And then I would step back and start to think about whether I really wanted to do business with that owner. You see, as leaders, it comes down to how we treat people. And in today's world, if we treat people poorly, they're going to vote with their feet. For a lot of people, you may have heard the terminology of quiet resignation. People just walking away and not saying much at all. Customers, including me, decided to vote with our feet. And I'm not sure I'll go back. And more than likely, I'm going to tell others about my experience at this cafe. Saying anything to the owner would not have helped at that time, at that point in time. They weren't listening to anyone. They weren't even listening to the staff or others to try and help out. Our customers and employees will always talk about their experiences, and we need to listen to others who are trying to help us. So listeners, in summary, yes, the owner was under pressure. They were losing revenue over a period of time as they couldn't do the coffees. However, they had a kitchen that was making beautiful food and they were still working, and they could still do teas and other drinks. The important thing would have been to look after the customers that they had in the cafe and look after the staff and give them an experience that then they would want to come back. Another lesson, now, if it's learned, sometimes the lessons aren't learned by leaders and others do grasp the actual learning as well. The lesson would have been to have a plan B, a backup plan, maybe a small spare grinder in the back of the cafe that could be brought out to help the situation until the bigger main one was resolved or fixed. So leaders, a smart leader will always have a backup plan. I'm not saying that the backup plan is always going to work, but having one is really important. And so, do we have a disaster recovery kind of situation? Once again, easy for me to say, not always easy to do, but a smart leader will actually always have a backup plan or understand what needs to happen in certain situations. We call that having a playbook. Remember that the leadership experience you create will influence people. You've all experienced great and bad leaders in the past, both negative and positive experiences. It does shape who you are today. You're a result of what has actually happened in the past. And I must admit, I've learnt a lot from bad leaders. In fact, I've learned that's the type of leader I don't want to be, but I've also learnt from them too. And some leaders who have been very hard to work with, or may have been the kind of leader that when I step back and think about it in hindsight, were possibly leaders who stretched me and challenged me to be even better. But that's not what I'm talking about today. What we've talked about here is that sometimes how we say things is really important. So my question to you is this. In fact, there's a few questions. How are you coming across to your team, to your peers, to your leadership that you report into, to your customers, and to your stakeholders? How are you coming across to something else that's probably even more important than what I've just shared? And that is how you're coming across to your family and your friends. What kind of leadership experience are you giving them all? Yes, there's a microscope on us as leaders. People are watching us every second of the day. What you say and what you do has impact. How we show up as a leader matters. So make sure that you are showing up to lead in a great way that will be an awesome experience for people. Hey listeners, this has been some of my thoughts based on what I experienced, and hopefully that will actually help you by using a live kind of example, but also bringing some leadership learnings into that and some insights that will actually help you going forward. Hey, I wanted to say to you once again, have an awesome year ahead. I know it's the brand new year, and I really want you to have a great year going forward. Hey, if there is anything I can do to help you, feel free to reach out to me anytime. But once again, a happy new year to you. Thanks for joining me on the Leadership is Changing podcast. Until next time, bye for now.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Leadership is Changing with your host, Denis Giannoutsas. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change, inspiring executives and leaders to adapt and lead a bigger game in a fast-moving world.